This podcast is a production of the Brickyard Network, an extension of the Archie Bray Foundation for the Ceramic Arts. To find out more about our lineup of ceramic podcasts, visit brickyardnetwork.org.
Potters, are you looking for high-quality equipment and supplies? Since 1974, Bailey Pottery Equipment, based in Kingston, New York, has produced equipment used in schools, universities, and art centers nationwide. Their gas kilns, renowned for ease of use, fuel efficiency, and beautiful results, are a global favorite. Bailey Pottery Equipment caters to all skill levels, offering a range of equipment and top brand ceramic supplies at discounted prices, all backed by their outstanding personal service. Visit BaileyPottery.com, the professional's choice for all things clay.
Hey folks, Sunshine Cobb here, ceramic artist and current resident coordinator at the Bray. I'm excited to announce that our application portal is now open for our 2025 residency cohort. Applications are due by December 19th, 2024. For details on all our residencies available, head to archibray.org/residencies. Please help us spread the word about this amazing new opportunity at the Bray. Thanks so much.
Hello, my name is Kathy King, and welcome to the For Flux Sake podcast. I'm coming to you from the Harvard Ceramics program in our fair city, Allston, Massachusetts. I'm here with Rose and Matt Katz of the world-famous Ceramic Materials Workshop, and they are ready to answer your burning questions about clay and glaze. Welcome to Fluxed Up, our newest segment here at the For Flux Sake podcast, where we talk to makers about what they do and how they may suffer. Because one thing is true in ceramics, no matter how good you are, how much experience you have, we have all fluxed something up in the studio. This week, Matt, Rose, and I want to welcome the great Lisa Orr to the table. Hello, Lisa.
Hey. Thank you.
I am, if you can imagine, one of those foam #1 hands. I've got that on and I'm waving it because I am one of your biggest fans. I'm just so fascinated to talk to you more about all the different pies you got your hands in.
Mm. Well, thank you so much. It's a huge honor.
Oh, we need to tamp that down right now. It is not.
Tell us why.
Yes. Why is that? Why do you want to talk to the three of us?
Y'all are fun and you know stuff that I don't know yet. So gonna pick your little brains.
Well, if you don't know, we really have to tell the audience to start right off. And if you don't know Lisa's work, go and jump on Lisa's socials and on her webpage, because it is some of the most beautiful, inspiring work out there. And I can say it's been feeding me for decades, and it's just the most beautiful stuff and some of the most creative, and I would almost say aggressively creative work out there.
Oh, well, thank you so much. I mean, it's low fire, and I love me some low fire.
Right on.
But boy, is it tricky sometimes. And Matt, I'll never forget at some NCECA a few years ago, I was just like, I'm having this problem. And you were like, I think it's this. Try this rabbit hole. And it worked. So anyway.
Sometimes I get things right.
Thank you so much for that.
Now, talking about going way back, I don't know if you remember this, but actually, I think it was the first time I ever met you, and it was at an NCECA, and I had been using your clay body for years. Denise Pelletier had given me your recipe when I was an undergrad, and I was starting to dip into low fire, and I loved it. I could throw with it. I could sculpt with it, and then I turned it into a casting slip, and it became my go-to casting slip, and it worked great. But I always had this problem that whenever the studio would be out of one of the ingredients, and I would try to substitute something else, and it would never work. Like the clay body fall
Oh my
apart.
God. Isn't that our
Wow.
state of existence right now? Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I'm at an Ensika, and I think I'd just done a talk, and you came up to the podium and introduced yourself. I'm like, oh my God, I love you, I love your work, and I use your clay body. And I sort of laid out this whole thing, and I said, whenever I try to make a substitution, it completely goes to hell. And you're like, samesies. I cannot do anything. And it is still one of those recipes that it is amazingly flexible to one degree, and then just completely static in another. And I love it. That's the fun question of ceramics.
Yeah. I have been tinkering with and, having trials and tribulations with that clay body for a long time. So I don't know. Where do we want to start?
Well, of course. I mean, that is the tribulations is really where we're at in this one, because as we were saying, it really does come down to that thing of trying your greatest. And actually, the clay body, I think, is a good place to start. Do you remember the history of that clay body, how you came up with it, where it
Which
came
one?
from?
The one at Alfred, the one with like 12 ingredients? Yeah. Alfred loves to have like a lot of ingredients in their glazes and a lot of ingredients in their clays, so that if something is variable, that the whole thing, it stays like more or less consistent, which isn't true for you or me. I worked on that with Bobby, the guy who was running the Alfred grinding room at the time. When I graduated and moved to Texas, exactly 0 of those ingredients were available in my area.
Wow.
So I used the school children clay, right? The talc white, the talc clay body. And that worked for a while. That worked. But the problem, I always have to, I make my own clay now, and I have a filter press, and I'm super lucky. And, getting that all set up was a project, but boy, is it worth it. Because if I use any of my recipes, I don't get a good result. Like if I use them in any other kind of clay mixer, I don't get anything good. I get a lot of crazing and stuff like that. Sorry, I talk with my hands at that point.
No, you're good. Yep.
That's fabulous. You use a filter press. There's not too many artists out there that use them.
Well, and I had tried to hire this job out to someone else who had a filter press. But as you know, we could talk about talc, but we don't have to.
No, we can't.
Talc is something that a lot of the clay suppliers don't want to handle for all kinds of reasons. But anyway, I don't mind doing it. And so I just know how to do it right.
So how big is your filter press? Is it like a little one or bigger one?
It's a cute little one. It's like, I don't know, as big as
arms
6
wide,
feet long. Yeah.
Okay.
I can make about 500, 600 pounds of wet clay on it.
That's
wow.
awesome.
That's awesome.
For the folks who don't know in the audience, because we talk about it occasionally on the show.
Yeah, I don't think we talk about it very often.
Not too much. A filter press is a different way of making clay. In the United States, the way most clay is made is in something that resembles like mixing a giant batch of bread dough. In fact, oftentimes they'll use sort of retired industrial bread dough makers to mix the clay. But a filter press is the way that they'll tend to make clay in industry, where you mix the clay as a slip, as a liquid, and then you push it through this high pressure filter press, this piece of equipment, and it extracts all that extra water. Okay, so that because you need the water to mix the slip. Why filter presses are so great, what Lisa's going at, is that when you mix those ingredients as a slip, they have the chance to homogenize and to balance out. So literally every particle is perfectly dispersed and perfectly mixed. You don't get uneven pockets.
And hydrated.
And that is and
There you go.
hydrated.
Yeah.
And those are huge, huge problems going on with clay manufacturing. And it's such a big deal. Every single company that makes things with plastic clay makes it with a filter press because their loss rates go down because they are mixed better. And it's only in art clay where they do the plastic mixing. And that's in the States.
Because we like to make it hard for ourselves.
Can can I talk about taking control of, hydrating,
Please.
like hydrating the in between every clay particle, because that's what that pressure does. They're pumping that slip under pressure through these sections where the water drips out and it's clean, and it actually gets pumped and makes more clay later, gets pumped back into the original
It's a
tank.
great recycling. Yeah.
It is. I mean, using kind of like, I don't know. I've learned how the clay manufacturers make money, and at least the ones in Texas, how their best profit comes from selling clay to schools. And so so they're not incentivized to make a really a high quality clay. And so what they're doing is a lot of times changing out the ingredients. And so, can I go straight into a disaster?
Sure.
Yes.
Please.
I remember when this was in the 80s. I probably was doing stoneware then still. And a friend of mine had bought for a clay center a whole bunch of stoneware from our local supplier. And they had made all these pots and filled this big kiln and, spent, days glazing all this stuff and put it in the kiln. And then at some point, their clay was flooding out the bottom peephole. And the clay supplier's answer, they had to rebuild the kiln and buy new shelves. And the clay supplier's answer was, we're just going to give you we'll replace that clay. Sorry. Whoops. And basically down in that part of the world in Texas, I mean, they would hire people who, with varying degrees of literacy in another language. And we all know how hard it is to read those clay bags. So that is sort of a risk that I feel like that's like the worst kind of risk that you take from buying from, anyway, that's a cautionary tale. If you can possibly get a mixer and make your own clay and take control of it yourself, that's a great thing. I have stockpiled a ton of ingredients for that variability problem so that I can dial it in with the ingredients I currently have.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
The corners are cut. You are 100% correct. It is all the clay suppliers, they make their business off of selling terracotta elementary schools. That is their business because the state of California buys thousands of tons of it. And, I always say, grandma doesn't care that little Jimmy's birdhouse is crazy. She's just thrilled to have the birdhouse. And it's a really hard thing when you're a professional and, you're doing it full time and you need every pot that goes through your hands to go out the door because that's how you're going to eat tonight, that you need it to be the highest quality. And it's not where their interests are. That's not where they need it to be.
Yeah. Sometimes they'll do a direct substitution of a new ingredient. It's like, whoa. Yeah.
And it's difficult. I mean, you mentioned talc. I mean, you're low fire. Talc's a big deal for you. Do you have a stockpile of talc? Have you had to make a switch over? Because we've had talc losses recently.
I have 16 pallets. Yeah.
Wow.
So I know I'm kind of calculating how much talc, I can use by the end of my life. My grandmother lived to 103.
Wow.
So I'm like, okay, how much of a talc how much, per year can I use? That's kind of where I'm at.
Well, if you see 3 people wearing ski masks outside your studio, just look the other way.
Yeah.
You don't happen to have a Custer Feldspar palette, do you?
Nope.
Hold on, producer Ben. We might need to bleep this because we all heard of the great Canadian maple syrup heist. Lisa's going to have a talc heist one day.
Talc heist, yeah. I know, and I have the good stuff too.
Wow.
Good
Secrets
stuff.
revealed. Secrets revealed.
Yeah. What else? Do you have an inventory list? We can shop while we're there.
No, but I'm going to jack up the price like lithium. So.
Oh, absolutely.
There you go.
Absolutely. Do it while you can.
I was going to talk about red iron oxide.
Oh, all right.
So I moved recently. And one of my suppliers in Texas has the best red iron oxide. And it's called, they term it synthetic. And that stuff is I mean, it's the color of Ben's shirt. Like it is red, right? And it works. I mean, and I designed my glazes around it. So I move up here and I have a little bit of it left. So I'm like, oh. And so I bought some potter was selling off some like old ingredients, and I'm like, sure, I'll have this much of your custard and your
Yeah.
sack of Spanish iron oxide and stuff like that. And so that was interesting. So that Spanish iron oxide was a different color than I've seen before. So I'm like, okay. And then it looks my sparkly glazes look different. My aventurines, they're very
Aventurines,
like
yeah.
specific iron dependent, it turns out, because I've just been using the same one available iron for a long time. So then I got a new bag of Spanish iron oxide. It's a different color. And then I ordered from a famous color company their high quality iron oxide. And I am getting 4 glazes from these 4
Wow.
kinds of iron.
Yep.
It's driving me nuts. And so Dr. Carty, who is famous,
Yeah, my mentor.
your mentor, told me to measure loss on ignition. And I don't know if y'all have gone over that, but basically you put a little pot, you weigh like 100 grams, you put it on a tile of the powder, and then you bisque that, you bring it back out and weigh it again. And so anyway, I had all different losses on ignition. My high quality iron oxide did the best. I like lost, 1% or less or something like that. But I lost 5% on the high quality iron oxide, which is really, really red. But what Dr. Carty told me is that the reason I'm getting such different glaze results is that you can't tell this on when you buy it, but I'm getting iron with FeO, more FeO instead of Fe2O3. Have y'all gone over that? And for Flux Sake, I can't remember.
No.
Anyway,
No.
basically,
No.
instead of being like sparkly and iron bearing and amber and staying put where it is, basically I get a waterfall of brown
Yeah.
because it
Oh,
has
yeah.
more, some irons have higher FeO in their percentage. And you can tell that by doing the loss on ignition test.
I was in one of our online classes just last night, and I had a student working on a tomato red, a khaki, one of those oxidation reds. And they had a recipe that the chemistry should have been tight. I've seen lots of other students do other things, and we'd sort of hit a wall because he was getting no red. And the one thing I said to him was, I think we need to look at your iron source. I said, what's your iron? And he's like, it's whatever's in the studio. He's just working out of a public studio. I'm like, we need to look at that iron, because we had a very similar experience with a consulting client a couple of months ago, where we had designed them an amazing aventurine, really stable, didn't move, sparkled like a disco ball. And we put a ton of work into it, and we sent them the recipe for them to try it in their production, and they got nothing. And we eventually went
nothing.
back,
Nothing.
just not a sparkle to be seen. And we went back and we looked at the iron source that their supplier was supplying versus the synthetic that we were using. And that was it, because the purity levels on the synthetic are much higher. And an aventurine specifically is a crystalline glaze, and that balance of molecules, literally, you have to have a specific number of iron molecules to get it to sparkle. And if that chemistry is off, because, the Spanish got extra silica, and, the generic red iron oxide is going to have a lower concentration, or a breakup between the Fe2O3 and the FeO, like you're talking about, or, the other one is we came across whole new iron sources. Laguna sells one they call brown iron oxide, which is so
Oh,
weird
yeah.
on top of it. But a lot of people, yeah, you're going to just take what you have, but some of those chemistries, they're so subtle, and it can be heartbreaking, because a lot of the time you make up a big batch of glaze, you assume it's going to work, and then that material source changed and you didn't know, or you were trusting that it was going to work, and it just, it's just heartbreak.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And shelf grape.
Oh.
Well, that's one question I have for you about your glazes. So if anyone who's seen your glazing, you've got this sort of amazing play on Chinese tricolor, sort of all these glazes flowing together, and the movement. How much of that is in your control, and how much are you just sort of putting up to
I'm
what
putting
the
it up to
kiln
chance.
decides.
I basically, when I started electric firing, like, so I started learning in the 80s, and like commercial glazes, like low fire glazes weren't super pretty yet. Now we've got all kinds of great stuff. But I I basically was trying to design glazes that would move so that I would be as surprised as somebody opening a wood kiln. That was my goal. How do I make my electric firing as exciting as wood firing? But I can just do it in an electric.
Yeah,
Push
absolutely.
the buttons, go to bed.
Now I have to stack wood.
No, don't have to organize a shift. Nope. So
Lazy firings are the best firings.
yeah. So
Yes.
basically, like on my cups, I don't know if you've seen them lately, but they have like a big moat around the bottom. So the stuff can hopefully fall in that and not like, go under and around. And I use a half strength of I use an aventurine usually around the bottom of like cups and mugs. And then I'll use a half strength version of that, which I kind of learned from Mexico. Anyway, and I stilt everything. So hopefully things
Oh,
get
you still
like
everything.
I do, and I make my own stilts out of I could make them out of nichrome or canthal or something, but they're better out of stainless steel. So I go to, because I'm
Interesting.
doing low fire, but I
Yeah.
use stainless steel rod that's the highest temperature that they sell. I'm not a welder, so I don't know. But it's high temperature and it's about the width of a coat hanger. And I have like a big, like bolt cutter kind of thing to, help me cut them into little, about 1 inch long thing, and I stick them into a Hershey kiss of clay. So they never bend over. They do get skinnier and skinnier, because they
You reuse
like
them.
the outside surface kind of flakes off like pepper. So there is that to watch out for. And I do fire some cups and stuff upside down on stainless steel rods that are kind of like they're thicker, like the thickness of my pinky or something. And and I just have this little funnel thing that I stick that in and I round it to a point and put my cup upside down or something.
Oh, so you get all the
So
flow
some
going up to the
things,
lip.
yeah, I
Oh,
love doing
The
that.
way you stack kilns, even bisque kilns, that's just an adventure. It's like a carnival ride to look at those.
I
It's
can get away with a
incredible.
lot in low fire. I'm not going to lie. So,
Enjoy.
yeah.
well, that moat is a really important detail to bring up for a lot of makers because we teach a lot about crystalline glazes, and they're famous for running so badly that people make these stands with bowls that catch the running glazes. And one of the things that we talk about when controlling them is how much people are not paying attention to just the geometry of their pieces. That geometry can help with glaze viscosity. Like some glazes are going to run, and to really think about your form to work with the glazes. So that's a really smart step to put in there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a little tiny one.
Yep, but that's all it takes. Just something that just like stops the avalanche.
And it's pretty. So what I'm going for on my surfaces is bringing your attention to very much to the surface and then contrasting that with the depth. So back and forth. And then that little moat is it's just another little texture, another little emphasis of the foot.
You mentioned Mexico a while ago, Lisa, and in addition to all the different things you do, clay cohorts and rocket kilns, building all over the country, I went to Mexico, I believe this past summer, to research luster and
Yeah.
traditional Persian techniques, was it?
Yes,
Could you talk
it was
about that a
so
little bit? Because I
fun
was
to
so jealous. Yeah.
Thanks. Well, there's one coming up in November.
Oh,
And
really?
darling, I'll go again.
Ooh.
So anyway, it's so fun to not teach a workshop, but to just take one and sit there and let somebody else handle everything. Oh my gosh, what a luxury. And so so I went with the Escuela Nacional de Cerámica, and so that means National Ceramic School of Mexico. And they take a calendar year and they focus on one country. So right now it is Iran. And so they are inviting people to come teach at their little place in Guadalajara. south of Guadalajara. And so we had 2 weeks in heaven. Like, we built 2 kilns and fired reduction lusters in both. I knew I liked them because I love Alan Cager Smith's work and the brushwork, and it can stand for hours in the Met in front of the Spanish like luster ware. But I haven't researched how to do it at all. And it was really fun to be just led right through it. And so we learned 2 kinds. There's in glaze, where you basically put the soluble salts in the glaze. And my alkaline glazes work great for this because you just need an alkaline background. You don't need lead or anything like that. They usually use lead, but anyway, and we did use a little bit of lead in Mexico. It was fine. It sort of everything happened at a different temperature.
Don't eat a sandwich while you're using it.
No, we didn't. We wore gloves and masks and stuff like that. And then the one really unenvironmental thing is you do need to cause smoke to happen to bring out the salts. But I loved it. We went from like metals, like metal coins, and we changed it into the salts, and then back into metal on the surface of the pot, which is such a great sort of cycle of the process.
Were you just dissolving them in acid, the coins and the metals?
Yeah, nitric acid.
Cool.
Yeah.
Nice.
And I think you had a post on Instagram where you were adding sugar to something. Is that
Yes,
right?
we were throwing sugar in as the reducing agent.
It's carbon.
It's carbon.
Delicious.
It works good. Here, I'm doing it here, and I'm adding fat wood because that stuff makes really black smoke, which is not in my environmental dreams at all. But boy, you will get reduction with that stuff.
Yeah. For those of you who don't know, fat wood is I think it is a southwestern
It's a brand
wood.
name, I think.
It's a brand name, but it's like the stump of a certain tree that's really saturated with sap.
Yeah.
And so
like, it's
that acts
usually
as
a pine tree of some kind.
Yeah. So that's going to burn really well. It does. And it's often just sold for kindling, so you can use that. So that's really ingenious. But I mean, you're right. It's never going to be ceramics is not environmentally friendly, and so those types of things of just getting that level of reduction it's going to have to take that because reduction you're going to need carbon in there. You need a lot of carbon to get it to fume back out.
Yeah, a sugar is an interesting source.
That's very interesting.
Sense.
It was the easiest thing. We just made little burritos of it and threw it in, and then put smashed KO doors while it kind of smoke found its way out, and we just tried to press it down and keep it in there. That guy got amazing results.
That is super smart. When we talk about, like in a soda firing, you're introducing sodium, but one of those things with a post-fire reduction, you'll often see people stoking with wood and to get that smoke, at low temperatures. And that's what it's doing. That's what the luster is. You're trying to confuse the metals that are in there so that they take up different oxidation states. But yeah, sugar, that's really smart. It's small particles. It's going to react to the heat. It's going to turn to straight carbon. It'll all burn out. Maybe sugar firing should become the new, the new salt firing, inducing instant reduction.
So great. Now in the store, the sugar is going to be gone instead of the salt.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I was just thinking of like my grandmother's purse filled with sugar packets from various restaurants. Like,
yeah, you could just kind of launch them in one at a time.
Pew, pew, pew.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. But I think it's just such a testament to, or you're such a great example of someone who's so established but always is interested in new things, always finding the time to continue research, never getting just stuck in your ways. So kudos to you.
Well, thank you.
An advanced process. I mean, filter press, doing loss of ignition.
Well, I don't do it by myself. Luckily, I have people who can help me. And so I gather them. And yep. They have some pots and So
So what are you suffering with these days in the studio? What's driving you crazy? What's not working for you?
Okay, so here's my question. So I'm going to tell you a story. So I also have a RAM press, and which is a ton of fun. And I got to play with it was practically the prototype, the one they have at Alfred. I am in making dyes, ceramic cal dyes, so Dallas Wooten, who's a friend, came over one time and he's like, I want to see how a ram press works. I'm like, let's make you a dye, bring a model. So he made this little bowl. It was lobed. It was beautiful. And so we miscalculated the amount of like ceramic cal to fill. So we had like, oops, we poured, because it's a long process to mix that type of plaster.
Yep.
And so you have 10 minutes mixing and something. Anyway, it was already, we were pouring it in the mold. It started to harden up. We were running out of time, and we were like an inch and a half short of stuff and so, oh no, what do we do? And we were like, I guess we just try to make some more and put it on top. And we did. So our mold literally was made out of one batch and then a 10 minutes later batch.
Mm-hmm.
And it still all worked.
Yeah.
Wow.
So my question for you is, how picky is that process really? And I also have some bags that I got from somebody, and I know they're maybe a year old. I feel like, can I still use it? I feel like the ideal is not, it's sort of like the food dates. In other words, will my my ceramic cal still work after like a year and a half? Because those bags are expensive.
They are.
Yeah. Like, how picky is that?
The plaster age is an open question that's a little bit hard to answer. I think about we're coming to the end of summer, and during the summer we rent this shack by a lake. And we were down there, and we made some delicious hummus, and we brought these pita chips with it. And we live only about 3 miles from the lake, but we've got air conditioning at our house, so it's really climate controlled. So we're down at the lake, and we had this bag of pita chips, and they'd been sitting there open for that week that we were there. And I go in there at the end of the week, and they're stale. But we'd had a bag of chips up here at the house where it's climate controlled, and they were perfectly fine after a couple of weeks. And it's that thing of sitting around in the humidity that could trip that plaster. And I definitely, I mean, I don't make a lot of ram dyes myself, but I make a lot of plaster things, and plaster will definitely turn if it ages. So, I mean, you're in New England, it can get humid
as
here.
Heck. It's 100% humidity.
and so to that one, I wouldn't wait a lot longer.
Okay.
And especially if that year, if there's been 2 summers in that year, it might be a little bit risky. So if you've got some dyes to make, you may want to consider making them sooner rather than later. As to the plasters matching, yeah, that should not be a problem. Anyone who's ever worked with plaster, one of the worst things that possibly can happen is, if you're making a 2-part mold, the first thing you do is you pour the first half and then you put some sort of release agent on it, whether it's an actual agent or Murphy's oil soap or whatever. And if you don't, they are now permanently one piece of plaster. They are going to stick and to bond. And so with the other plasters, if it's just there and you haven't put any release agent. And the one other variable, and I assume you're doing this because you're making a high quality mold, is that you're weighing all your plaster, you're weighing your water, and you're keeping that recipe the same. And that really is a big deal for making sure that the quality of the plaster is going to be the same hardness and have the same porosity, because that's one of the things with ram press molds is, the water gets drawn up into the mold, and there's the whole purge system that pushes the water back out.
Our purges were different on that bowl, like one part purge. You know what I'm saying? Like it was like a little off because of our two, when it was setting, we were purging and we were like, blah. And so I don't know. We just sort of, I don't know, MacGyvered it. And
after you used it after the fact, does it works just fine?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, that's probably just a point in the plaster setting that it was going through, because you're getting different processes in the chemical conversion of the plaster. Yeah, but it should be okay.
Yeah, we were surprised it worked, but it did.
Plaster's a pretty dumb material. It just needs its handheld in the right ways, and then you can get it to do what you want. But
Okay.
yeah, absolutely, for sure. Oh, you literally are everywhere. Well, I have one other technical thing we got to ask you about too, and that is the Rocket Kiln.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So you have developed a tiny, efficient wood kiln.
It's sort of, I just would call it an off-grid kiln fired with wood, because you don't get wood results because
Right.
it fires too fast. You can get atmospheric results if you soda it or something like that. But what I love about it is that it's smokeless, as long as you're not doing luster reduction. It's smokeless, and everybody has an old junky kiln, one of those old electric kilns laying around to do something with. And if you just have like some hard bricks and some soft bricks, you can make this particular J-shaped firebox underneath it. It is necessarily high up in the air because the shape of the firebox, basically it directs the flame. It targets the oxygen mixture and the flame, to enter that chamber in a certain way. A campfire sucks air from everywhere and puts smoke everywhere. It's, you can also fire with that, and put that under a kiln and it'll get to temperature at some point. But what this is trying to use up every bit of the carbon molecule in the wood. So we're using, we fire with kindling. So all the surface area is exposed so that the wood gases can get out and escape quickly. If you put a log in there, you're going to get smoke. If you put a bunch of kindling, you're not, because all of the wood gases can get out of the wood and go through the J-shaped firebox up to your kind of up on a couple of cement blocks, your firing chamber, your old electric kiln. And then you add a chimney somehow on top if you're just doing updraft, like Osa Atoe is, or like if you're doing downdraft, like both of mine that I have here are downdrafts, actually. Yeah, two are downdrafts, one's an updraft. But I like to do the TDI method, which is you put a kiln shelf. Have you heard of the TDI kiln? It has it's a way to take an electric kiln shell, put a kiln shelf vertically to make inside the kiln chamber along one wall a little bit, sort of like 4 inches away around the back of one wall, so that the flame can go up, hit the top, go down underneath that kiln shelf and make a downdraft inside the chamber.
So you're blocking off part of the chamber to make a cavity that becomes the chimney.
Thank you. Yes, well said. And then you put like a slotted little hole for the exit flue on the back of that thing, and you can, sort of MacGyver like some sort of damper back there. Anyway, to transition to a round chimney, because you do need around a 4-foot chimney, which I use a double-walled metal chimney.
Just like a prefab?
Yep. You can get them on Amazon. I find them on Marketplace. Try really hard not to get scammed. Everybody, watch out for cheap, too good to be true kilns and pottery wheels on Marketplace. This is your PSA from Lisa Orr, who has been scammed a few times.
That's a whole other episode.
Do not put a deposit.
See it in person first.
Go there in person. But the scammers have sent me to strangers' houses to fulfill the scam.
Oh,
and there was no pottery wheel and no kiln there. So anyway, that was my PSA. But anyway, so yeah, but you can get really inexpensive chimneys on top of, for the top of the kiln to go up there.
What was the inspiration to do this?
When I bought my property in Massachusetts, when I moved here, there were 2 barns. One of the barns is made of cement block, and it was used as an apple storage unit. And it's big enough that a car can drive in it, or a truck, and load up crates of apples. So it's a nice, big, large space. But it was cooled, but not heated. And so I needed a heater in New England to live and survive and do my pottery. So having studied permaculture design, one of the things that northern permies do is they install rocket mass heaters, which us pottery people will love. So they are the rocket style design inside a barrel, which emanates the heat like a 55-gallon drum. And then it goes down and runs through a clay couch, a clay called a mass. So that's the mass part of the rocket mass heater. So I have a clay couch in my studio, y'all. It's warm.
Okay.
It's a butt warmer. It is fantastic.
I love it.
Yeah. And then it exits out a little chimney flue, and there's no smoke. And I just use up for that. I can use any low quality wood, all the junk that falls out of my trees. I, kind of break it up and fire and I heat with that. So that's my off-grid heating system. And I just wondered aloud to my friends that helped me figure out and install this thing, what if we put a kiln on top of this? I wonder what happens. And so they're so funny. They were like, well, we think it would probably work for pottery, but there's no way to tell temperature inside a chamber. And I'm like, hold my beer. And so
I got thermocouples, people. I got cones.
I know. So I ordered some bottom of the line thermocouples, and we found out it was going up to like 2100 Fahrenheit. I know. Let's see. What does that translate to Celsius?
You don't need to really,
something.
Lisa.
Anyway,
It's 1120.
anyway, going back and forth. Anyway, so I tried pots in the, we tried a chamber on top. We put them in the chimney. We kind of put them in the bottom, in the burn tunnel. And I got glaze everywhere on everything. I got ash in the burn tunnel. And I love Simon Levin took one look at this thing and he goes, that J tube, that's basically a train kiln. And so John Neely was looking at the exact same thing to design a low smoke or no smoke train kiln, which is really cool. And so, because if you want ash, put it in that burn tunnel part, but just don't block the airflow too much. So, anyway, so we've been refining it. We have really dialed it in. And the best thing has been, so the shape, the rocket firebox is basically shaped like a J, and you put the kindling vertically in the part of the J, and so it self-loads as it burns. The best thing has been at the bottom part of where the kindling hits is to open up that area, which that part is not open on a traditional heater like I have in my studio. I just scrape the ashes out by hand out the top. But to have like a perforated kiln shelf so that air sucks in right there and burns the bottom of the kindling right there, I get no ash. I mean, that thing fires fast. I had newbies firing my rocket kiln, and they got it to cone 6, 7 tipped in 2 hours. And I guess I have a question for you about speed and glaze development. All our stuff looked good. Maybe I have low standards. I don't know.
You're talking to Mr. Fast Fire here. What do you think?
Because everybody's like, well, what about glaze development? Well, we're not doing, like 8-day jewel drips on our, wood. We're not going for that. But for getting to temperature and looking kind of good, we had some pots we've been experimenting, soaking them in lithium and soda ash and fritz and stuff like that. Those things came out great. We sodaed them a little bit, but just cone 6, no glaze, some standard clays that were iron bearing. Stuff looked good. It keeps looking pretty good.
I personally believe that I think everybody gets really paranoid about the speed of their kilns. And I think computer controlled kilns made it worse. Because you came from the day. My first kiln, it had the knobs.
Have you seen the ones with the light switches on and off? Yeah.
And you just sort of fired it, you go this long at this, and then you turn the knob up, and then, I didn't have, you didn't have thermocouples on those kilns. You put in the cider cone, and it would stop when it went off. And I think that there's something out there in data sciences called analysis paralysis, where you get so concerned when you have data that you like react to. And I think computer controls and seeing thermocouple readings live have made people paranoid. But ceramics are incredibly tough, and that they can take it. And then, like, even you're sort of phrasing it as the glaze development. Yeah, that's not a thing. It really isn't. Our glazes melt during the last 100 degrees C, 180 degrees F of the firing, and they are just going to melt. Okay. The big question is how long does it take you to get through those last 180 degrees? If you go really fast, you have to fire to a higher temperature. That's what the heat work concept that people talk about is. Or if you fire slower, then you can fire to a lower temperature. But it's the same basic chemical reaction. It's just fast or slow, hot and cold, and how those two correlate. So if you can get to a temperature and the speed of the firing correlates to a slight shift in the exact temperature that you're getting to, things will melt. Like, that is not a problem. The tile industry, right? On our regular show, we talk all the time.
Oh my God.
Rose's tiles. The slow kiln was how long?
The slow kiln was 45 minutes from end to end.
That is slow.
Yeah.
I mean, Carla Wagner's kilns down at Dowell Tile in Mesquite, Texas, like, those things go 18 minutes, and they are an 18-inch square tile.
Yeah.
And they are just like being scooped up and boxed after 18 minutes.
Yep. Ready for shipping right at the end. Yep.
And so it can definitely take it, as long as you are getting to that concept of heat work, the exact temperature and the time it takes to get there, it's fine.
Well, then there's cooling for crystal development, I suppose. Like, there's the slower I cool, I get more crystal development.
Yes.
I get a different looking crystal development in the rocket kilns, unless I sit there and want to fire them down a little bit.
Yep.
Aventurines are crystalline glazes. And I mean, you've got a bunch of different glazes, but to the aventurines particularly, all crystalline glazes are exactly the same. Everybody hears crystalline and they think the big zinc silicate crystals, right? But no. Aventurines are exactly the same chemistry as those big crystalline glazes. They're just, instead of using zinc as the alkaline earth that crystallizes, they're using iron. And iron is an alkaline earth. It's not just a color, it's an alkaline earth flux, and you can make any alkaline earth, almost any alkaline earth, crystallize. And so that does depend on the cooling. So yeah, the slower you cool it, the more chance it has for the crystal to develop, because they develop on the cooling. So that is a factor. I would say that's probably the one downside of the rocket kiln, is it'll rocket up, it'll also rocket down. Yeah. And that's why a lot of electric kilns cool so quickly, and people do their slow firing programs.
I'm adding a second damper, just at the top of the J tube, so that I can just close it off so the chamber cools a little bit more like a regular electric kiln.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Because I feel like air can sneak and leak into my little pile of bricks that I haven't mortared, because I'm always rearranging them.
Well, as you're describing the kiln, I do have to say, actually, that is an ingenious part of the design, in that, you're talking about how there's no ash and how it's clean. Well, when we have to talk about wood, or you're talking about sugar and anything that burns made out of carbon, right? The whole thing that you're trying to do is complete a chemical reaction where you bond carbon with oxygen and it creates heat as a byproduct, right? And so the reason why it's so clean is because I'm not a fire designer or a kiln designer or anything like this, but I believe it's called a preheater, right? Where you preheat the air. And that's what that long chamber is doing, that it's getting the air hot. So as the ash continues to travel through it, you have hot air that will pick up the carbon that just sort of floated away before it gets to the chamber.
Exactly.
Yeah. And so it is going to be crazy efficient, because there's literally nothing left that hasn't oxidized. When you're firing in reduction, it's really funny. We've spent a lot of time working on reduction over the last couple of years, as we finally built our workshop and we have a reduction kiln in here. Our reduction firings are crystal clean. We never see anything resembling the black smoke or anything like that, because that's not what reduction is. If you see the black things, you're wasting fuel. And even when you're firing in a reduction atmosphere, you don't need the black smoke. You just need less oxygen than the flame requires. But if you have black smoke or a ton of ash, you're just not combusting everything. And yeah, some people like that as their wood firing. It would be really hard to do it because your kiln is so efficient. It's going to burn everything.
Right. Yeah, I would like to get an oxy probe so that I can dial in like how much reduction do I need for these lusters, you know?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Have you tried the lusters in the Rocket design?
Yeah.
Yet how are they coming out?
It's hit or miss. We've gotten really nice results a few times, and we've also had a lot of misses. So, I got a smaller, tighter kiln, like one of those, I think it's a doll kiln or something from the 50s. It's one of those little metal boxes. It weighs a ton.
Completely
and it's
jacketed.
Like super. Yes, it is so tight. And so I put a little damper on the bottom of it and a damper on the top that's really snug. And so I'm getting much better results in that.
Wow.
So really good stuff. But I can still fire it in my little off-grid way using just a little bit of kindling.
Amazing.
Nice.
Amazing. Oh my goodness, Lisa, we have to have you back. We could just go on and on all day.
Gosh.
But thank you so much for giving this time to us, and I'm not kidding. We're going to have you back in some form or fashion.
Yeah, I'll let you know when something works out over here.
Let us know when something melts down.
Yeah.
And I didn't even tell you about the time and everyone's had this one where you have copper in a glaze and somebody puts in cobalt. We've all had that 6% of cobalt in there.
Ooh, goodness.
That's
Let's figure out how much money that would be.
I know, right?
By today's standard.
Like $30.
Oh my God. If not, yeah. All
No,
right.
this was a blast. I think it's kind of a good community service so that you're not like in your own little studio, like going,
I know, right?
Oh,
Mhm.
yeah. It's our PSA.
yes.
Exactly. I'm not
Pottery
using Facebook
self-analysis.
Marketplace.
Yeah. Do not give a deposit for anything.
No deposits. No
No.
deposits.
No.
All right. Thank you, Lisa.
All right.
Thanks,
Thank
Lisa.
you so
Lisa.
much.
Well, folks, that's it for this week's episode of For Flux Sake. I'd like to thank the listeners who submitted questions this week. And if you want your question answered on the show, shoot us an email at ForFluxSakePodcast@gmail.com. So join us next time. And when in your studio, remember what Rose always says.
Always remember to test, test, test. This is a test of the emergency glaze system. Beep.
Good job, guys.
Great.
That
That was
a blast.
great. You came up with
Yeah,
some
that's
really
fun.
good terms. One band name, Northern Permies,
Yeah.
The Northern Permies. I like it.
and then a country album, Shelf Scrape and Heartbreak.
Oh, yeah. That's a good one.
That's kind of my middle name.
I love it. That's so great.